This past Thursday evening, something extraordinary happened. 328 people, largely friends and neighbors we don't know here on the Upper West Side, gathered in this sanctuary. I'm not sure that many of them would have thought or described what they were coming to see as worship. But for those of us who were there, wasn't it? 328 people gathered in this sacred space to hear an old story that many of us are still learning. An old story that time has tried to erase. An old story that was told it didn't matter. An old story that didn't make the history books I read in high school. We gathered on Thursday night to hear the story of Juneteenth. That day in 1865, when the last remaining enslaved African Americans learned that they were free. A full 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Who would have ever thought it would take the news of freedom that long? Who would have ever thought that it would take 2.5 years to get to Galveston, Texas? Who would have ever said that freedom travels so slowly? But this Thursday night, we heard that story, and we heard beautiful music, and we listened to the words of poets. We heard music, we heard story and poetry. These are always the works of prophets. And together it began to paint a fuller picture of what liberation can mean and how it can work. 328 of us in this space for a concert about the newest federal holiday on record. We haven't hit that number for Christmas or Easter, the oldest of our faith holidays, but I think we can get there. The young teach the old as well as the old teach the young. Thursday night's concert was and has much to do with our own story here at West End. A story of our march to liberation and of our continuing works of justice and faith and belonging. The concert on Thursday night was the work of our community chorus, conducted under the fourth baton of its existence. A little bit of history. The community chorus was a dream I began dreaming about in the fall of 2019 with the then music director, Cynthia Powell. Now, many of you know Cynthia is a gifted community music director, and having seen what she could do with the Stonewall Chorale and with Melodia Women's Chorus, I started challenging her to think about how she could use those gifts here at West End, to build something at West End. Rather, I questioned than presenting the work you're doing with other organizations, how about producing the work here at West End under the banner and auspices of this church as a matter of our faith engagement and of our community and a gift to the neighborhood? It was a big request I was making, I was told, and we knew there'd be work. And so we began putting it together, and on a February evening in 2020, some 62 people walked through the doors of this sanctuary on the first night of rehearsal. They walked in unannounced, unexpected, unregistered, simply responding to an invitation that had gone out to the community to come and make music with us. It was startling. And I think we knew that we were faced with a growing moment, that we didn't quite understand or what to do with it, but we were in for a penny and in for a pound. The spaghetti had left the pot, hit the wall, and so far it was sticking. Now, that community initiative sadly only lasted a few weeks before the March 2020 shutdown, and it took us a few years and several stops and starts to get it back together. And when we did, it was under Henry Lee's baton, and folks trickled back, some still in masks, socially distanced across the sanctuary, which makes for lousy choral singing, doing all the things we knew to do then. And Henry and I took a similar approach. The arts heal, we know, and making art together helps put souls back together. And at that point, frankly, we all needed to go back to kindergarten for a refresher course on how to simply be with other people in the same room. So we came back together slowly at first. We made a Christmas concert and a spring concert, and Henry started taking some of the chorus up to Columbia and to assisted living facilities where our music ministry brought good cheer. It was on the road. The chorus and Henry produced a spectacular version of Mozart's Requiem last year, and then Henry, like so many young families, had a job opportunity in a much cheaper city where he could live closer to work and where he and Yenyu could raise their growing family. The story of artists in New York was right here and alive at West End. And so we yet again entered an interim period, a wilderness time. Barry Clota, who had subbed for Henry on occasion before, joined us and got many things up and running and organized, including musical room filage that made no sense to no one. And his consummate care for instruments and his expertise in organ maintenance is still helping get these pipes back into shape. Turns out pandemics are really bad for buildings and musical instruments and, well, all other living things. If you neglect any of these things, they fall into disrepair. Expensive disrepair, as it turns out. And Barry has and is still leading a charge to restore the organ and to make music continually excellent here at West End. He also led the community chorus through its fall 2024 program and a Christmas concert just 6 months ago. All the while, a search team was busy sorting through a national roster of applicants of who would join us as our new director of music ministry. This new position reflected a stance of the board and of my own that we needed to invest more in music and the arts at West End, that we were ready for a full-time 40-hour-a-week musician who would build our programming under our name for our church as ministry, Director of Music Ministry. And that search team found Derek Byers, who joined us officially only in March, just a few months ago. I have done a few things right this year, and many more of what we shall call learning opportunities. But in reflecting back on what this year has been, here at the end of our fiscal year, yes, there's still time to pay your pledge, restructuring our program staff and hiring Derek may be among my greatest prides. Derek joined us and immediately immersed himself in the work of bringing the community chorus out of an interim period and into a new dawn. Derek also created an Easter Sunday morning that none of us will soon forget, and that again raised the bar. This past Thursday evening, the bar was raised even further. And our community chorus, our sanctuary choir members, our section leaders, a lineup of spectacular guest artists of color, and I must tell you, 3 of our own members, Narvi Runlet and Ruby Green and Keith Haynes, who read poetry, along with Kim Moore, who told us all the story. Friends, the bar knocked the roof off this place. The energy here was electrifying. There was everything one could want in building community. There were faces new and old. People cheered and talked my own ear off, and many of yours afterwards, to say that this was simply spectacular. I've never been here before, they'd say. I'm coming back. The chair of Collegiate's consistory, Danita Branham, who is a member of Middle Church downtown, she was here. So too were Anna Dravis and Richard Walker from our Collegiate Central office. Danita made a beeline to me in the back of the sanctuary after the concert and said, well, Will, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say that's a, 15, 16? Who would have ever said that West End would be growing in these new ways of engaging, new ways of involving, of community building, of standing in the intersection of faith and justice and art? Who would have ever said? Who would have ever said that this old church building here in the heart of a largely white, largely Jewish neighborhood would have programmed a concert for Juneteenth with authenticity that has people from across the city taking notice? Who would have ever said we'd be doing this much? Who would ever say that this is only the beginning? God says. God has said, and God has called. God has created a moment for us to all be together doing a new thing. And together, here we all are, learning and struggling how to let go of what had always been comfortable, but perhaps limiting. Here we all are, learning and struggling to grow into new ways of being for new generations, seeking community. For younger folks, finding a way to church in ways that mean we have to change to meet them, not them to meet us. This past week was also the 7th anniversary of a phone call I received from search consultant Kevin Chase and then chair of the local consistory, Andrea Steinkamp. That phone call officially asked me to join with you in ministry as the 58th senior minister of Collegiate Church and to come and serve alongside you as pastor. Who would have ever said that was going to be the case? Who would have ever said that 7 years, one pandemic, countless changes, a complete collapse of the collegiate system as we had known it for decades, the closing of an outreach ministry, now the closing of one of our churches, that completely new financial models and the loss of over $100 million in the collegiate endowment, and now needs to sustain our own ministries rather than having it sustained for us. Who would have ever said that these would be our first 7 years together? And who would ever say that we are growing because of it? God said. And day by day, and Sunday by Sunday, and spaghetti on the wall by spaghetti on the wall, here we are, doing together what only God could imagine, doing it together. Change and liberation, freedom. It doesn't come overnight. That's one of the lessons of Juneteenth that I hold most dear. Change and liberation, freedom. It doesn't come overnight is one of the lessons Scripture teaches us again and again. Think back. For 40 years, which was then the lifespan of an individual, the ancient Hebrews wandered in the wilderness before they could enter the Promised Land. It wasn't that they didn't know the way. It was that they weren't ready. The chains of slavery, of bondage, of being property, not heirs of salvation, those chains take time to let go of, to burn off. We humans, we get used to things, and sometimes even the worst of our days get normalized and expected. We get broken down, and we forget that there can be more. We who are enslaved by any number of old patterns and want to break those chains and to live into new freedom, we know that this is hard, hard work. Trauma is passed from body to body. And it took a generation back when Moses led that exodus for there to be enough of a collective forgetting of how to be enslaved in order for a collective learning of how to be free. Despite what they might have thought, it took 40 years for them to be ready, really ready, not just saying they're ready, but really ready to be free and to truly live as free people. This yearning how to be free is the work all of us can do. It's the work that requires faith and that marches boldly forward when we stop spending all of the journey looking over our shoulders at what had been and carrying all the things that we don't need anymore. Wilderness times, interim times, trial periods, test cases, these are moments, hard moments, where deep change can occur. Changes like moving from being enslaved to learning to be free. And this is all part of human development. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Trial and error. Leaning on someone next to you when you're ready to collapse, catching someone next to you when they're ready to give up. Learning to hold hands and to link arms and to raise fists together. Who would have ever said that Sarah would bear a child with her 100-year-old husband? Who would have ever said that such life at such an age was possible? Who would have said that prayers take that long to be answered? God said. And in response, Sarah said, God has brought laughter for me and everyone who hears it will laugh with me. God has brought laughter for me, and everyone who hears it will laugh with me. Sarah's delight at her firstborn is infectious, and it's cause for great celebration. It is upon Isaac's name that Jews today, and that even Jesus in his day, would claim their faith. Who would have ever said this? And who would have ever said that such an inheritance would go to Sarah's first child, not to Abraham's first child? For earlier in the story we hear this morning, when they were sitting alone in their tent asking each other how they could ever have a child, God answered Abraham and Sarah's prayer not by Sarah conceiving, but by a surrogate, a slave of their own household, a woman whose consent is not known, but that we can imagine she didn't have a choice. Her name was Hagar, and Scripture blithely describes her as given to Abraham in order to conceive a child. We don't give people. And that child's name is Ishmael, the elder, born to Abraham and Hagar long before Isaac was born to Abraham and Sarah. And Ishmael is who modern-day Muslims claim as their heritage for connecting to their faith and to the promises of God to their grandfather Abraham too. When these two half-brothers were but children, Sarah became jealous of the boys playing like brothers do. They were just being boys. And out of that jealousy, out of her position of power over her enslaved woman Hagar, Sarah demands that Abraham banish his own son and his mother. Who would have ever said this is something a father could do? Abraham didn't want to do it. Scripture is clear on this. It says that he's distressed. But God says there will still be a promise that out of Ishmael, a great nation would stem from Abraham's firstborn, just as from his second. Our father Abraham, from one man came three faiths. We Christians include him in our story too, and out of our father Abraham came many nations. Those two eldest nations, the one named for Ishmael and the one named for Isaac, have lived at odds with each other for generations. Perhaps ever since poor young Ishmael was left to die under a tree because his mother, banished or newly free, however you want to think about it, didn't know what else to imagine or do. Sent away from her livelihood, in a foreign land, out of water, with no food, with no promise of a job or income or any help at all. Sent away. I can't imagine Hagar felt freed or liberated in that moment. Who would ever say that she could? She was in the wilderness. And there, in the midst of not knowing, God shows up. And God says, and God provides all that we need. Family feuds, changing church patterns, brothers against brothers, holding on to what enslaves us because it is all we know, jealousy, hard of heart, refusal to see the God in you is the same as the God in me. This is how we keep each other enslaved. And Juneteenth tells us of a story of a 2.5-year wilderness period where free people didn't know they were free. Who would have ever said such a thing would be possible? We did. We white people did. We who then, as so often now, controlled the narrative and the press and the timing of the release and what we discussed openly versus how we enacted policy behind closed doors. We did this. That's not the path of faith, friends. That's not the journey to liberation that our scripture beckons us to. Juneteenth, to me, this year, as I continue to learn, is a call for us all to do better. The scripture we heard this morning is a call to do better. The United States siding behind closed doors with the heirs of Isaac and bombing the heirs of Ishmael occurred while some of us slept last night. Who would have ever said this would be the case? What do we say about it now? If we pick up that Chinese proverb from a few weeks ago, we might say, I don't know. It's good. It's bad. We'll see. And that lesson of impermanence is at the very heart of what wilderness times can be. Set off from one place, not knowing the next place. It's good, it's bad, we'll see. Times when we know enough is enough, and to say so without knowing what's next. Times when we know we must break the chains, but that are still scared to do so because, well, we've kind of gotten used to them. Who would have ever said that this could happen? Who would ever say that this can happen? God does. Every day, in every breath, God gives us. Breathe in freedom, breathe out captivity, breathe in liberation, breathe out resentment. Who would have ever said? God says, breathe in life and breathe out fear.